I would love to start out with how you got involved in media. I love hearing those origin stories, especially now that we're seeing legacy media having a very pitiful death. So, how did you get into the game?
Yeah, legacy media certainly is having a pitiful death. It's not a transition into just straight propaganda houses. But yeah, I started back in media almost 20 years ago, and it's always played an important role in my life. I spent 10 years in the tech industry, working with a large computer company, so I know Silicon Valley real well, and then got to go work for a ministry that was instrumental in my walk with faith and bringing my walk to Christ, D. James Kennedy Ridge Ministries. And Dr. Kennedy, if anybody knew him, he was a patriot, very concerned about this country and the direction the country's going and was going at the time, and then got involved with what we launched NRB TV, which was a Christian worldview PBS, because PBS is anything but a Christian worldview. And then that brought me over to the National Religious Broadcasters Association. And so now I run this great organization that has over 1,200 members that are in radio, television, podcasting, streaming, publishers, authors, filmmakers, churches. If you're streaming, you're in Christian communications. NRB represents you up on Capitol Hill. And we work hard to make sure our members can stay active in the public square, because there's a lot of opposition today to the Christian message.
There is a lot of opposition, and I do want to talk about that further. But before we do, I really enjoyed this article you wrote for Fox News about, or this article about you, and how you are saying that it's okay and in fact necessary, essentially, for Christians to rock the boat to promote God's truth. And I got to tell you that since leaving legacy media, it has been kind of a struggle of, I knew I wanted to, now that I had the freedom to deliver news the way I wanted, that finding that balance between presenting the biblical worldview, showing the idiocracy of what's happening in the world, but trying to do it with grace, right? That can be a hard balance sometimes. But I do love that you're like, you know what, we can't just sit idly by. We need to be bold in our message. So tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, if you look back over the history of the Christian faith, the Christian faith has never meant to be what some on the left, some people would say. It's never meant to be private and personal. While we have a private and personal aspect to it, we're called as Christians to be truth and light in the public square, to be that beacon on a hill. And that's been the history of Christianity over time. If you look at where Christianity has gone in different cultures and different places, they've really ended some of the worst pagan practices that have been out there. And that's because Christian stood up for the truth and stood up and really talked about what their faith means. And that's even more important today, as we see this culture, as you said, really kind of taking a wrong turn and really going down a deep immoral path. It's really important for Christians to stand up. So many of our institutes today have been co-opted by the left and by the government to push messages to our kids, to youth, to teens, social platforms that are contrary to what we believe as Christians. And so it's a great time to live as well. While on one hand, we have this cancel culture trying to silence Christianity, on the other hand, like your program, we have these wonderful opportunities for Christians to get into media today at low cost, get in, start talking, build audiences, and reach people with the truth. And I think we have a culture today that is so hungry for the truth. They know, they've figured out they are being fed lies today. And it's so important for us as Christians not to be silent and not to sit back and watch our brothers and sisters be led down paths that are going to lead them to places that are full of hurt, full of pain, and full of suffering.
Well, we know that we serve a God that loves truth and righteousness, and He has equipped us with the Holy Spirit to have discernment in figuring out what that truth is. And I personally feel called, now that I have the freedom to deliver news that I want, to try an effort to look at things from a biblical lens, because it's never been more apparent, the spiritual battle that we're in. But we also want to be vigilant that we're not ever being used as a pawn in the voting aspect. I'm constantly saying we need to be leery of people that say they're a Christian, and that maybe their fruit is lacking there a bit. So where do you see evangelical voting? Because on the one hand, you do have people saying, oh, evangelicals are being used again. They were used by George W. Bush, who tapped into that voting base before, and a lot of destruction of freedom happened under his watch. And then people are like, how can evangelicals vote for Trump, who certainly hasn't lived his life in righteousness? So how do you respond to that?
Well, yeah, look, first of all, as you said, Christians have to watch of being co-opted by different groups, and including people who, as you said, talk about being Christian, but yet if you look at their worldview and the fruit of what they do, it's anything but Christian. And look, we don't live in a perfect world. We don't have like a perfect choice, and none of us are perfect. None of us have backgrounds that anybody would want to go through with a microscope, some of the things that these candidates really put themselves through. But you have to look at deeper issues than that. You have to look at the issues of who do you want to be governed by and how are they governing. It's not so much a personality test between this candidate or that candidate, although we have to look at those on equal terms. But who do we want to be governed by? What kind of policies are these candidates putting forward? What are their ideologies and the beliefs they're putting forward? And are they co-opting their own beliefs? When we look at the presidential debate, we looked at one candidate who talked about pro-life issues completely against what his faith stands for and what his own denomination, his own group stands for. So you have to look deeper at that. And Christians are doing that today. Christians aren't setting back today. They're not being co-opted by one party or the other party. They're standing back and they're holding candidates and they're holding individual parties responsible for the things that they govern at. And that's really exciting to hear, because we hear more people talking about the issues today rather than just voting along party lines.
Right. And I mean, certainly we have the evidence of the status quo to see what direction our culture is heading in, and how much the current administration is willing to throw out American values, family values, protection of children. And so I really do think that for that reason alone, we have an obligation to assess our current status quo and basically do the opposite. Whatever that means, because I mean, we are never going to have a perfect Christian candidate. I mean, let's face it. I mean, even King David was a philanderer and
Right.
everything else. It's because God's grace that King David was a man after God's own heart. But we can pray for our leaders, certainly. And as we head into July 4th, my hope is that we all do take a reflection on why we came here, what we were escaping from, and how near and dear freedom is, the gravity of people giving their lives so we could retain this freedom, because it is certainly under threat. But you have probably such a wider vision of what this day means, as a former Navy veteran. So tell me about what you were thinking and your hope for this July 4th.
Yeah, that's right. As a Navy veteran and as a veteran and talk to veterans all around the country, and veterans are great. Those of us who served, we stay together. We're a close family. We understand what we did for our country, and those who are giving today for their country. And I do hope people remember that this country, the freedoms that we have, these freedoms, first of all, they're not given to us by our government. They are given to us by our Creator. They endowed to us by our Creator. And that's the foundation which we stand on as a country. And we fought for across this country for years. And we fought against the tyranny that would pull those away. And we have a government today that wants to do that. So I hope people, my hope across the 4th of July tomorrow is that people will remember where our freedoms come from, and our freedom, our individual freedoms. They're not given to us by this government. And this great country needs to get back to being that beacon of light around the world, the country that people wanted to come to because of those values, those morals, those freedoms that people desire, the American dream. And the thing that we exported the most as this country was that gift that people could have freedom. And we need to get that back today. We're giving up way too much in this country to those elitists who think they know better, who think they can control the population, they can control us. And I hope people really recognize today the freedoms that God has given us, that our Creator has endowed with us, and remember that's our source of freedom.
Absolutely. And also just to be grateful for the simple things of being able
Mm.
to freely open our Bible. I've interviewed other people, missionaries, who've had other missionaries in other countries who have to be under constant threat of attack, and evidence of their Christianity being out. I mean, it is crazy to face that reality sometimes, that we do have it good, whereas we can worship freely. But in that, certainly Christians have become under increased attack. I can't believe the sentences being handed down just for essentially praying outside of abortion clinics, and then this transgender agenda. It's alarming how that's permeating even Christians who feel called to be the father and mother of children that don't have one, particularly in adoption. Now, if you hold to your Christian values, you can be considered not appropriate to be an adoptive parent. I know that this is near and dear to you because you are an adoptive parent. So tell me about that and what you see happening moving forward as far as that attack on Christians.
Yeah, you're right. That is very near and dear to me. I have four wonderful adopted children. My wife and I didn't even think twice when we found out that, having children naturally wasn't going to be an option for us. We looked at God. We're adopted into God's family. As Christians, we understand that first and foremost. And to adopt kids into our family was just such a wonderful privilege. And they've grown up to be just wonderful young adults. And we have just a great family who all loves one another. And hopefully, most of us will be together tomorrow. But look at what the government's doing there. Again, you talked about the marginalization of Christians and the discrimination against Christians and the persecution of Christians. Now this HHS rule that's going across the country to say you have to affirm transgenderism in a child if you want to be in foster care today, a foster care parent today, or you want to be an adoptive parent today. Christians by majority adopt and are in the foster care program more than any other group across this country. Christians open up their homes, they open up their hearts, they understand what God has done for them and what they can do for these kids that are in crisis and kids that need a home. And to now say that Christians can't participate in that, you're going to pull 30 to 40% of the families out of those programs. And where does that leave those Christians? How is that loving these children and understanding these children today in this country? It's just beyond, it's crazy. It's beyond me that we have a government that thinks that that's a good idea, that that's a good thing to do. And this is good for the programs, for the foster care program and the adoption program today. We have a number of organizations that are standing up and fighting against this. We'll be talking about it a lot more, like I said, because it's very important to me, but it's important for us as the church to have the free exercise if we want to raise our children, whether they're adopted or whether they're in foster care, the way we see fit, the way we believe they should be raised. The government should not be involved in that.
100%. And you won't hear about these things unless there's the existence of independent and Christian media. And so I can see why that is a passion of yours, being the president of the NRB. And there is going to be another convention coming up. I mean, it seems like it's far away in February, but as we both know, as parents and everything else is going to be here before we know it. So tell me about this convention. I've actually never had the pleasure of going, but I'm very intrigued. It sounds great. So please tell me more.
Yeah, the NRB convention is an annual convention. It's the largest gathering of Christian communicators, people that are in radio, again, television, broadcasting, radio broadcasting, television, radio program producing programs for the web, podcast streaming, you name it. If you're in Christian communications, churches today, almost every church is streaming today. And so this is the largest gathering of those professionals. We have the largest exhibit floor. We'll have over 200 exhibitors that are there to help you in your ministry, to help you in your areas of communication, to help you with programming. We'll run panels all day to talk about the top topics that are facing Christian communicators and Christians today in general. The whole gender movement, the attack on the families, attack on churches today. So we'll have all of those, the top speakers. Last year, we had a candidates forum. President Trump showed up. The other candidates didn't, unfortunately. But we'll have all of those folks there. Again, it's the largest gathering. It'll be in Grapevine, Texas, just outside of Dallas at the Gaylord Texan. It'll be February 24th through the 27th. And we'd love to see, if you're in Christian communications or you want to know what's going on in this area, we'd love to see you there.
Well, I absolutely would love to go, and I don't have an excuse because it's right here in Texas. I'm more in the Austin area, but I could certainly make the trip up for that. Well, thank you so much, Troy. I mean, this is such an important topic because there's even more increased aggressive action by this regime to censor topics like this, to censor the truth. And unfortunately, SCOTUS is kind of punting that, as we've talked about in previous programs. So this is so important. It's important to rally behind Christian media and support the NRB and those that are doing this. So thank you, Troy, so much for all of your insight.
Thank you for having me today.